I would define my sexuality and my gender heterosexual, cisgender woman. In high school, I didn't have like a good enough. I definitely didn't have a good enough understanding of what any of that meant to say it with any sort of real like um, gusto. You know what I mean? Like, I would have just been like, I'm a straight girl. Like, I don't know. I didn't have that the idea that you could be anything other than that, or like the non-binary options in that aspect.
I pretty much identify as queer. I typically am with women. But I have been with men before. I don't really have an emotional connection to men, so physically it's fine. In high school, I just kind of identified as bisexual. It's kind of just like a blanket thing, and for the last part of high school, I kind of just identified as gay. It was just easier.
Like teased about maybe being a lesbian in high school, and that kind of made me defensive against the idea, I guess.
In high school, when I identified as my gender being female, I identified as a lesbian. And then later, when I transitioned to having my gender identity be male, I identified as a straight man. And now I identify as asexual and biromantic.
Definitely would say I identify as pansexual. I just don't really hold any preferences or specific attractions to physical things, gender attraction or preference or anything at all. I'm very, very much like based in getting to know people, so I've experienced a lot of different relationships. I think it's opened me up to just connecting with more people and finding people on a wavelength of just understanding as people and as essences of people. In high school, I don't think I ever was like, hey, I'm straight. Like, I don't think I ever really felt like I was needed to say that, or I definitely always kind of knew that wasn't true either. Just going on from like third grade, I pretty much knew. I had this connection with one of my like really good friends that was like kind of romantic, and for me that was like a point at which I was like, okay, I kind of know. And that was scary also for a long time. So in high school, I think it was just kind of like I wasn't really, not until like later in high school, I didn't really like date or like do anything. So it was kind of just like, like I think I like boys. I'm just kind of like feeling uncomfortable all the time. So my sexuality in high school was uncomfortable.
I would define my sexuality as gay. However, in high school, it wasn't so clear to me. For most of high school, thought I was bisexual or just confused. I tried to suppress these urges and feelings because I just wanted to be, quote unquote normal. My high school and community wasn't a very accepting place, and I had only known, one or two people that were out, and I saw the struggles they went through, and to be their true selves in a very judgmental place. And I just didn't want to have to deal with that kind of struggle.
Identify as male. In high school, I identified still as female. I didn't come out publicly as transgender until September of 2016.
In terms of gender, I identify as a woman now, and I identified as a woman in high school, so that hasn't really changed.
In high school, up until halfway through my sophomore year, I identified as female, and then from the middle of my sophomore to the end of my junior year, I kind of identified as genderqueer, but just to like emphasize that I wasn't female. I only really identified as genderqueer to give a label to it so I could tell my parents I wasn't trans when they got suspicious and asked about it. And then at the beginning of my senior year of high school, I began to identify as trans, but I didn't come out until the end of my senior year.
Gender now, I identify as non-binary. I think that definitely goes hand in hand with my sexual preference of nothing. It's kind of weird to describe, but I'm sure this makes general sense. I definitely grew up tomboyish, whatever, while simultaneously being very like enamored and interested with more effeminate, things. I don't know. I just always felt like partially, not necessarily like a boy or that I wanted to be a boy, but just that I had both sides of the binary in my spirit. So that took a long time to come to terms with in comfortability with presenting myself, because like I said earlier, I just had like a lot of fear growing up of addressing my sexuality and thusly my gender as a separate aspect of that. And there was just like a lot of fear for me, I guess, in addressing that, and I never wanted to be like too butch, never wanted to be too masculine. I was like really into sports and being physical and being like really strong, and I think as I got older that like that sense of masculinity, and I really like enjoyed that. So I guess in being non-binary, it's kind of simultaneously like a fusion of both those sides of my personality and my identity, and also releasing from either like confine. I definitely feel really uncomfortable like being feminized. I really feel I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was with it on a personal like anxiety level until I started using gender neutral pronouns, and kind of transitioned away from a lot of female behavior that was sticking to me as like a byproduct of trying to like really emphasize that womanly aspect. I kind of never really liked doing that, but just felt compelled to. So my gender now, I'm like a genderless glob of flesh. It's great. And in high school, obviously like I was female identifying. I'm definitely still like probably femme presenting. Most people automatically use like she, her, assume I'm like a woman, like the feminization doesn't like stop. In high school, yeah, I was the gal, I was a lady.
I would define myself as a male, as I always have. Even though, many people in the gay community may occasionally do drag or wear heels, it isn't because they are confused of their gender per se, but it's part of celebrating our sexuality, being comfortable in our own skin, and becoming part of the community that we love. And also because, most people are total queens who love the attention.
I guess comfortable when I was 14. That was my first time kissing a girl. I wasn't really publicly comfortable with it until 18. On a personal standpoint, I didn't care that I was with women. My family did, and I didn't tell them until I was 18. I pretty much stayed hidden during high school with that. I mean, I'm sure they knew, but I didn't say it. But I mean, now, definitely super comfortable.
It took me a while, honestly, to even recognize that I wasn't entirely heterosexual. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was so uncomfortable with the idea back in high school. Something that made it easier for me to like recognize or like come to terms with it has definitely been like my journey, like studying and learning more about like feminism and like women and gender studies. Reading like theorists and learning more has made me realize that like it's not such a narrow binary, and that there are a lot of points along the spectrum that you can fit into.
It was on and off that I was comfortable with it. Like when I figured out that I was attracted to women, I wanted everyone to know that I was a lesbian because I felt comfortable with people knowing that I was attracted to women. And then I sort of got more confused about it and then became less comfortable with it. And then later when I realized I was trans, I was like, no, I'm a straight man. I'm only attracted to women. But then like lines get blurred and it doesn't become as important anymore. So now I identify as asexual and I'm biromantic, so I'm attracted to both men and women on like a relationship romantic kind of level.
I was comfortable saying I was bisexual by the time I graduated high school to like a select group of people. So I was still kind of like, I didn't really feel the need to be like out about it because, I had limited experience with other women at that time. Comfortable has been like when I'm 21 now, like when I was 20. So like within the past year, I've really become comfortable with like saying that. So it took me a long time to get comfortable with my sexuality, absolutely. That was very scary for a long time. It was just kind of like, no, never happened. I'm attracted to boys, so like there's nothing else there. That's all there is to it. There's weird tingly feelings and attraction to women that, I've known has been there. It doesn't matter because I'm attracted to guys.
I wasn't really comfortable with my sexuality until I was going to my sophomore year of college. I was kind of out at my senior year of high school. However, I was able to suppress most of the rumors and ignore it because I just wasn't ready to be out. I would say that a major turning point in the semester, it was in the semester of my sophomore year. Me and my mom were having lunch, and she asked me if a few of my friends that she had met were gay. And after I said yes, she's just like, well, why are all your friends gay? And then my response, what do you think? So needless to say, she wasn't that shocked. We have grown much, much closer now, and I don't have to hide my biggest secret from her anymore.
Being a woman, there's such a spectrum, and you can be so many things as a woman. And I think in high school it came out of a place of like, I don't understand sexuality or gender or any of that or anything. And now it's more like I'm still exploring where I fit in. So it's not like I'm like uncomfortable. I guess I am comfortable, but I just, I don't think I've really found my true like place of like, yes, I am this and I'm 100% comfortable with it. And I don't know that anyone ever really is. Definitely in college I started to feel more strongly about, my womanhood and my femme presence and feminism in a whole, and that came with the exposure of meeting people who were trans and outside of the binary and like having conversations with people about those things who didn't, define themselves as just one of the two genders or, sexualities.
When I was younger, I had a lot of troubles with my gender identity. My mom remembers a lot of fits that I had. One of my first sentences was, "I a boy," and I was very upset that people didn't see me as that. I started coming out to my family and close friends around 14. I really, really became comfortable this past summer, which is when I started seeking the medical side of it and seeing if I could be approved for hormones. And once I was medically approved, I came out publicly to everyone.
I've always been comfortable with my gender. It's never been something I've questioned. So there's no point in high school or beyond where I had to come to terms with that. I've always just felt like a woman.
I was uncomfortable with it for a really long time between my sophomore and beginning of my senior year. I wasn't really comfortable with being female, but I also wasn't comfortable with being genderqueer because I knew that I wasn't. And then when I figured out I was trans, I became really comfortable with that identity. But then as my time through my transition progressed, I became less comfortable identifying as trans because it's not that important to me anymore. I just identify as a man now.
A little late after probably being more comfortable with my sexuality. That definitely followed in the same package of understanding and self-learning. I'd say within the past maybe 6-7 months. It definitely took me being surrounded by really brave people to help me open up to living that and understanding that about myself.
I've always been comfortable with my gender. However, I think now that I'm out, I participate in a lot of androgynous events in the gay community that I'm even more comfortable with. Wearing a pair of 5-inch heels and strutting across the stage, it can be empowering and quite masculine.
It was very wealthy, white, waspy, Anglo-Saxon, super low minority population. And I think that caused a lot of problems with, like I was saying, athletics and guys and girls being part of our artistic group. And, you know, I did a lot of music, and I think that being a girl was definitely a different experience. You know, you see all the musicians in high school, they're all guys, you know, so finding your place to fit in there, and the dichotomy of the binary of guys and girls in high school, at our high school was definitely, there was a strong divide there.
At least when I went there, was weird. It was in a weird in-between point. I know that Josh Magnus and I, when I was first there, it was not very okay to be gay. I think it was like me, him, Billy, and Evan were like the main, as weird as that sounds, the main gay people. And then there was one lesbian couple that was a senior when I was a freshman. I wish I knew their names. But I don't know, we were kind of seen as this like oddity, and you know, we had the whole, oh, go shopping with me, and oh, my gay friend. I mean, my friends, when I came out, they were like, oh, we don't know any gay people. Like, that's how, you know, I mean, the climate was fine. It was more of just a don't ask, don't tell. People kind of ignored it. And it wasn't too big in like social media yet, so people weren't really talking about a lot of issues. Yes, there were issues, but were they talked about? No. Accepting enough, like, I didn't feel threatened or scared ever, so I guess that's good.
The climate of Severna Park High School. I think we were better than other schools when it came to accepting sexuality. I know that a lot of my friends were out or were comfortable not identifying as heterosexual, but that might have also just been because of the group of friends I had. I'm sure it wasn't as accepting in every social circle, and I know that there was still a lot of derogatory language used towards people who didn't identify as being straight.
No one really cared when I told people I was gay, and if they did, I never heard about it, and I never felt like anyone cared, in a bad way. I never felt like anyone was judging me for it. Even though they probably were, I never noticed. So I guess the overall climate of my high school was pretty accepting, because I never experienced anything other than that.
That's a dense question. The climate, I guess, if we're talking in regards to, you know, gender and sexuality and awareness of a lot of that, it was pretty closed off. I feel like there was like a group of kids that were in some loose way like rumored to be queer to whatever degree they were rumored to be, and you know, they were kind of like thought of as weird. You know, one of my really close friends was out in 8th grade, but you know, they did a lot and to like blend themselves into their own degree. So I guess the climate there was it was definitely like, if you weren't, you know, trying to achieve the look of normalcy, like being athletic, you know, well studied, good grades, whatever, yada yada yada, like you're hitting all the checklists on the, like, you know, suburban white kid list of, you know, what's good, what's normal, what's going in the right direction. If you weren't actively trying to be that, you were actively trying to be different. And that's not in saying that people were actively trying to be different, but that was the perception, I think. So the climate there is definitely, it's your standard high school climate. Like, there's tons of cliques that are adhering to their own styles of normalcy within that, like, sphere. I mean, there was definitely like a lot of good crossover, I think, because of like some of the like school activities that would go on. So it wasn't the worst, but it was definitely really intense on people, and it had a huge strain on a lot of people's mental health. Like, and again, I do feel disrupted by it, the way that high school was to some degree, because the fact that I can't recall like a good amount of things that happened, like, makes me feel uneasy.
I would say that the climate in my high school was extremely negative. It wasn't accepting whatsoever. And if you weren't associated with the popular crowd, then you were basically nothing. So rumors spread rapidly, and everyone's reputation hung on a thread. It could be destroyed in less than an hour. There were definitely days when I was sick to my stomach, worried about my reputation, and if it had crashed the day before, I dreaded going back to school and having to see everyone's faces.
I had a good high school experience. I think, at our school, there's probably such a low-key gender role expectation that came from all aspects. I mean, faculty and staff, the way they treated each other. Athletics, I think, were a huge thing about how, males were treated, boys were treated, females were treated, girls were treated. Like, I think that was all very, there's definitely a the binary was, very real, I think, in that aspect. I was a lot less of a go-getter. I was very timid in high school. That definitely played a role with the things that I felt like I could achieve or I wanted to achieve. I don't know that really had anything to do with whether my high school experience was good or not. But that was more of a self-discovery thing.
I didn't really have many troubles in high school. I did theater, so you kind of just make friends automatically. Sexuality was interesting. I was sexualized a lot just because of physical attractiveness, and there's always that stigma around girls and the whole threesome thing, so that always came up. There was a lot of drama with people thinking that I liked everyone. There was some weird dressing room stuff. That did happen. And also people not knowing that I was trans. They would talk about trans things, and that was hard. They'd be like, it would be so weird if there was a transgender person in here, and I would just kind of stand there and be like, oh my gosh, it wouldn't be that weird, right? And, girls thinking that you're staring at them while they're changing. So it did kind of make it a little bit of a weird experience. I got kicked out of a store once for being gay. I got cast in a show that I didn't want to be in. It was the last one on my list, but it was a gay show. It had gay characters in it, and I was picked to be in it because of that, and it made me really uncomfortable. And the director, who I won't name, they tried to make me do a stage kiss, and they said it should be fine because I'm gay, but like I said before, I wasn't out to my family, and they were going to be there. I was just so uncomfortable, but I don't know, people assume a lot of things when you're gay, so it was interesting.
I was never bullied or mistreated because of my gender or sexuality, probably because I'm cisgender, and I didn't identify as being queer or bisexual in high school. I remember some instances in late middle school or early high school in which people would tease me about being a lesbian even though I didn't identify that way, and I think that's because I was so strong in my support of other women, and I was okay with physical affection between other women and myself. So had I been lesbian or had I identified as something other than straight, I think it might have been a harsh environment, but I definitely think that changed as high school went on.
They didn't really play much of a role in high school, because I only came out as transgender to close friends and to my family, and I don't think anyone knew that I identified as transgender until the end of my senior year. And my sexuality didn't play a whole lot of a role because whatever, I came out as gay. That's not a weird thing. I did theater my senior year of high school. It's not a thing people are surprised by much anymore. So they didn't really affect my high school experience overall.
High school was weird. To be honest, I don't remember a lot of high school. My childhood times have kind of just been kind of lost and jumbled. Not a lot of it, but some good chunks of it just because of trauma I'd gone through shortly following high school. My high school experience, though, in terms of just, and it was pretty reclusive. I was very insecure. I didn't really like socializing a ton. That was always very strenuous for me. It was to talk to people and to push myself out there. And it's something I always wanted to do, but I was just generally that's I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And I'm still kind of like that, but high school was a much weirder time of that because I was super super insecure. I had no clue about like who I was. How did your gender and sexuality play a role? I think definitely deep down in a subconscious level, it was always disrupting my like steadiness. I did not grow up around any people that I knew that were like queer on any level. You know, my first like best friend that came out to me, I was in 8th grade. So that like was for the first time. It wasn't to say it was abnormal, but that was the first sensation I'd experienced, or the first instance I'd experienced someone being queer. And it was kind of like definitely an eye-opener to be like, oh, like there are people that are like close to me that are like this, and I've just never even had a conversation about these kinds of things. It's, you know, encountered like queerness in like movies, but it was kind of weirdly touched upon, and I experienced queerness on an individual like personal level, but didn't really know, like I had nothing to contextualize that with. I was like, that's just pretty gross and weird, and I'm like pretty fucked up, so I should just forget about that whole part of my life. I think that just insecurity was like super deep down. It took me a really long time to like be okay with things. Like even still when I was like 18, 19, like, you know, I still was pretty scared. And I guess that's still young in like comparison to some people. So I'm lucky in that way.
High school experience was interesting to say the least. I spent most of my time of it trying to climb social ladder and be part of the popular crowd. I was sometimes successful and other times failed miserably. My sexuality didn't really play a role because it was something that no one knew except for the few guys I had hooked up with during high school. So in my attempt to be part of the popular crowd, I dated several girls and had lots of flings. I was never truly happy in any of these relationships, even though I may have appeared to be, because I just knew it wasn't what I really wanted or desired.
My peers were very open-minded and understanding. I think there was definitely sort of that the immaturity of like, ooh, girls, or like, ooh, boys, but I don't think that really was problematic at all. Like, I think I was treated well. You know, I definitely think I was treated well. In hindsight, I can't think of anything unless I've like blocked it out permanently, but yeah, I think I was treated pretty well in high school. By my peers, pretty well respected, as I think we all were of each other, very respectful. I don't feel that I was ever harmed or disrespected so much because I was a girl or because I was straight or, anything like that. I think there was sort of this, like, implicit, like, when it came to playing with a band of guys, like, they'd all be like, like, do you know what you're doing? And there was this always like, oh, like, like, that's fine. Like, you just do, like, you play your acoustic guitar and, like, do stuff like that. And, like, we'll be in the real bands. And, like, I think girls were probably undermined. I feel like, looking back, I think my artistic abilities and my musical abilities and stuff like that were undermined a little bit because I was a girl and there was definitely a niche that you were expected to be in. So, I think I was treated differently in that way, because of it.
Guys kind of ignored me, which isn't surprising. Like the jockey guys, I wasn't really too close with them. People in the theater company were fine. No one was ever too mean to me. Some people called me like stupid and an idiot, but that didn't have to do with my gender or anything. I got called a fag a few times. I was never physically threatened, but there's always people who are just going to find something wrong with you, and I guess that was my main one, was that I was gay. Girls wanted to use me as an experiment. I got, like I said, I was kind of just sexualized and objectified. I did have a lot of problems with people not actually wanting to like me and know me for my personality. It was more of this is exotic kind of thing, and they wanted to try it in that sense and then not talk to me again. So I did have a problem with that. Gender, they didn't really know. I still identified as she, so they just thought that I was just a lesbian pretty much, and they just wrote me off as butch because that's what people assume. I mean, I didn't have short hair or anything, but I didn't dress feminine by any means, stereotypically feminine. Um, so the whole gender aspect of it during high school didn't really apply to me as much. I mean, I felt dysphoric as hell, but that's within my own mind.
High school peers treated me well, but if they hadn't, I wouldn't have noticed because I didn't pay attention to them. When I started presenting more masculine, people thought it was a little weird, but I didn't really pay attention to how they felt very much. My sexuality kind of, I don't want to say it made people uncomfortable because I never really got that kind of vibe from them, but it was like weird to guys when they were talking about girls they found attractive, and then I tried to join in and talk about girls I found attractive. So I guess people were uncomfortable by my sexuality, but they weren't really people that I would want to have a conversation with anyway. So I guess people were a little weirded out by my sexuality, but not in a way that made me feel oppressed or uncomfortable or anything.
Like I said earlier, I was, fortunate to like just be like cis presenting. I definitely aimed to present as that. And it felt like a shield, kind of like in hindsight now, having like dropped that shield, like that was like an automatic response, was to like, I really wanted my body to be like super feminine, and I was like, why don't I have like boobs, like nice boobs, like why, like it took me like a while to get my period, like to like fill out or whatever, and I was always just kind of like pushing for like clothes and things that would like make me look more feminine, and that in middle school also carrying over into high school. I was really in and out of peer groups, like up until like the last like year and a half of my high school experience. I think I was like pretty loosely like friends with people. Like I was just kind of like, I would hang out with them for like a spurt of a few months, and then like we would like kind of disconnect or whatever, and I was just kind of like, and I think that partially was just insecurity, was not being able to be like close with people for very long. Again, I was passing completely. I was not even trying to think about it. I was just trying to like get in, get out, go home. I was definitely like under the radar. I did not give a shit. I was just too scared to even like, I had too much insecurity already to deal with like my body and eating problems and all that shit to like even think about, try to add that into the equation at that time.
How they treated me definitely depended on which peers we're talking about. I'm somewhat of a social butterfly, so I like to have friends in various friend groups and not just one concrete group of people. So, most people treated me fairly nicely, but there's definitely times when I was bullied and harassed, and, when I was mistreated by one group of people, then I'd move on to another group of people that I had made friends with. In regards to how my high school peers treated me in the context of my sexuality, I would say that I definitely wasn't fooling anyone in regards to being gay. There are always rumors swirling around that I was gay and that I was hooking up with blah 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 guy, and the majority of the time they were actually false. This caused some people to distance themselves from me, especially some of my male friends, because they didn't want their sexuality to be questioned either.
I think our photography class was super empowering, and I was really comfortable there. It was a space where, we were all women in that class. We had a female teacher, a woman teacher, and I think that definitely was a space that I felt really confident and comfortable. And now I think it's more related to creative spaces, and spaces where, I'm not just being looked at for, my gender or my personal beliefs. It's more about what I'm creating, and a space that I'm not just represented by what I look like or who I am, but my brain power and my thoughts and my ideas. I think that class was a great stem for me to, find more spaces that were comfortable like that.
I had a lot of private blogs during high school. I had a private Tumblr where I would follow trans blogs and talk to trans people. So that was kind of my go-to. Physically, I want to say the stage, especially my senior year, people kind of started to figure it out. I filled in for a male character once, and people kind of looked at me and they were like, like if you changed your hair and like acted like you would be a great guy. Like that happened a lot. My comfortable place physically or online now, probably Twitter. For an online basis, probably on Twitter, I've been out as either non-binary, like trans, for almost 2 years now. So that's really a comfortable place for me. I don't use Tumblr anymore. Kind of became unhealthy just being alone with my own thoughts. And it's nice. I know a lot of trans people in the community through Twitter. I'm very supported through Twitter. I know it sounds funny, but I really, it's just important to me. Physically, being at other theaters, just because those people there really do know me and they do respect me and my name and my pronouns. Being at work is hard. I work at Office Depot, and I don't read as stereotypically masculine yet. Even though I am, on hormones and everything, people see what they want to see. So it's a little hard there because I'm just misgendered 8 hours a day. But, when you walk into a theater, it's a fairly accepting place. I've run into a few problems. I guess, like, the difference between, like, how I was in high school and, like, now, like, with my comfortability, I guess on Tumblr I wanted to, like, be by myself. And on stage, I only felt comfortable because I was acting, and I thought that everyone would just know that I was acting and they wouldn't think much of it. I was actually terrified during high school that people would find out that I was a guy. It was really scary. Like, I don't know where that fear came from. I think it was just that I was almost trying to deny it, and I was scared that they would figure it out and think it was weird and, want to kick the shit out of me or something. So, I don't know. It was nice pretending, and now in theater it's nice feeling authentic. And with Tumblr, I was hiding again, and I was alone, posting on my own. No one could see my post, and now I'm on Twitter, and I know that people can see it, and people can relate to it, and people can really, express it with me. And it's nice to hear people be like, oh, I also have that, or like, that's normal, or, oh, that's really cool.
Or honestly, in the dark room, something about, being there with only like that soft, weird red light, kind of was neutralizing, and people didn't really like speak to you or like harass you in any way, and it was very safe. The same way at like both of my jobs, it was a place for friends and a place for comfort, and I never felt like judged.
The physical places I felt comfortable were pretty much nowhere. I didn't feel comfortable at home because my parents didn't really understand my gender identity, and if they did, they sure did not do a good job of convincing me that they were comfortable with it. The only place I felt physically comfortable was like a friend's basement where their parents weren't there. I never felt comfortable around adults because adults are incredibly untrustworthy with that kind of information when you're in high school. I found online communities sort of like the transgender subreddits and stuff like that, but everyone on there was so much more further along in their transition than I was, because I wasn't far along at all. I hadn't even really started. So eventually it just kind of got to be a thing that made me more upset than less. And it's a thing, like, being transgender is a thing that I have a hard time connecting with people over. So I don't really have any trans friends besides, like, one or two.
No, there really was. There was, like, Tumblr and stuff. I used, like, AIM when I was little. Never really got into MySpace. And no, like, I didn't really, like, use... I used Tumblr for a little bit. Like, had, like, this, like, stupid anonymous writing blog. So I would use Tumblr for a little while to, like, communicate that. I didn't really, like, feel like I connected with people on there. I kind of was just, like... I felt like you had to use it, like, a lot to get anything out of it. Facebook was just, like... it's, like, a monotonous, like, passing stream of shit. So, I guess I was, like, comfortable on there, kind of. I would, like, try, that was a place to, like, maintain the maintenance of, like... an image of whatever you're trying to present. I definitely use Twitter like a good... Like, Twitter is stupid, but I love it. Out of anything, like, I don't really like using anything else but Twitter for in terms of, like, openness and places where I feel like I connect with people. I've met a lot of really cool artists and musicians and everybody in between on Twitter, and actually, like, made some really cool friendships out of that. I think there's a more diverse array of like information and people to interact with on Twitter. And I just feel like it's been easier for me to connect with like queer peoples.
The place that I felt most comfortable in high school was actually my home. That's where I could hide my face when people were harassing or bullying me. When something was happening at school, I either tried leaving home or couldn't wait till I got back. I never really felt comfortable anywhere else, and that's mainly because the people that were in those areas is never fully accepted in my sports teams, events, or at parties. Now I feel comfortable almost every place I am. But, where I feel most comfortable is the gay community in DC. Even though there's a large population of LGBT people in DC, the community is quite small and everyone knows everyone. You would think that this could be troublesome. However, it's enabled me to always have a friend, always run into people that I love when I'm out and about. So obviously there's a stark difference between where I feel comfortable now and then. And this is mainly because I'm out and comfortable being my true self.
My perceived self was a lot less worthy in high school than my actual self. I was very self-critical in high school about who I was and who I hung out with and what I created and what I did, and I was really hard on myself, I think, in that way. So my perceived self was a lot less ambitious and a lot less worthy of my friendships or any of the praise I received or anything like that. And dealing with, I think, growing and having those moments of self-discovery through college really helped me sort of combine my perceived self and my actual self into one whole self.
My appearance has changed a lot, obviously, but my personality has too, just because I'm more comfortable and I'm more confident within myself now. But everyone during high school just knew me as a girl, and I never was a girl. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're talking about transgender people, they say that they were born female and now they're male. You're born male. It's a brain thing. I've always been male. I was born in a female body. Anatomy is my biggest enemy, and everything. But I was born male. So anyone that knew me in high school, they never knew a girl. They just knew a boy named Kathleen. And now they know the same boy named Atticus, who is now finally comfortable letting people in on his little secret that he is indeed a boy. For the most part, I still kind of talk to people from high school. Obviously, we are still on good terms, and, I don't have any big enemies from high school or anything. I don't have many close friends, but that's okay too. You meet new people. But a lot of people have reached out to me and told me that they're very excited to see that I'm much more comfortable now that I'm out of high school. Pretty much as soon as I got out of high school, I started slowly transitioning within my own comfortability.
I think that's a hard question for me to answer because I had a really hard time perceiving myself at all for a very long time. And it really did not I think that caused a huge amount of depression and stress, was trying to understand who I was at all, period. I think my actual self was probably just very shy and passing and nondescript in general. Probably really not on anyone's radar. It was probably not as bad as I felt. And you I think anxiety and insecurity adds on more insult to it in your perception of what's going on than actually what's going on.
My perceived self and actual self were quite different in high school. I definitely put on a show that I was a straight bro that liked sports and girls and drinking. I kind of laugh at how pitiful that was now. But that's what you had to do to, fit in at my high school to survive. My actual self was an unconfident, scared, closet guy who dreaded rumors and confrontation. This caused me to hide from my reality and do things that I didn't like or want to do, all because I wanted to fit in.
There's a lot that comes with that transition between adulthood and high school that is really hard, and a lot of it stays the same, but I think you gain so much new information through new experiences that you know, everybody, I think, is going to feel differently when they come out on the other side.
You know, it's normal. It really is normal. I mean, just anyone in the LGBTQ community, we've been around since the freaking pharaohs. We've been around forever. And you know, it's good to talk about it. Like, it's not something you need to whisper about because it's not a bad thing. It's just like people who support people when they want to lose weight and dye their hair and make themselves feel better and make themselves feel authentic and happy. That's pretty much what I'm doing. You know, I'm giving myself, you know, the hormones that I think that my body needs and deserves and should have had when I was born. And, you know, and I'm making alterations to my body. And just like everyone else, we all do it. And mine is just a little bit different.
And I'd like to think that, like, high school or, like, society in general is becoming more accepting. I know that in high school I didn't know what, like, being transgender was, or what, like, not identifying within the gender binary. I had no idea that that was even a thing. And, like, coming into college and, like, studying it, it was something I learned and, like, became comfortable with and accepted. And it seems that, like, more high school students are aware of things like that. And so it's exciting to see, like, a movement towards acceptance and change.
The only thing that made me really uncomfortable in high school were adults. Parents are unaccepting. Teachers are unaccepting. There were times in high school when I felt like I was like the weird odd one out, and I was made to feel that way not by my peers who treated me relatively well, but by teachers. The only teacher that knew I was trans was my senior year second semester English teacher, and I only deemed her trustworthy with that information because there were 3 other people named Sam in my class, and she was going to start calling everyone by their full name, and that was a thing that was unacceptable to me, and, like, it's a thing that would have been devastating. So I told her, so I was like, hey, if you call me Samantha, I'll probably start crying. But there were teachers, like the teacher that was in charge of ordering the caps and gowns for graduation. I wrote down that I was male because they are 2 different colors. So when I got the male blue colored cap and gown instead of the female, like, yellow cap and gown, the teacher in charge of that didn't say anything to me directly because when I picked it up, she wasn't there. But she personally attacked my younger sister in class. So she just pointed her out and said, your family got the wrong one. And I still don't know why we didn't put in a formal complaint against that teacher because that's an incredibly humiliating thing to have to go through. Other than that, the only other time I really felt uncomfortable or really felt like I wasn't accepted was in my first semester English class in senior year. We were reading Beowulf out loud. And my teacher pointed at me, the student who is the quietest and glares off into the distance the most, and dresses entirely in male clothes, and when you split up the class between male and female students, I stand in the middle so you don't have to distinguish which one. And she pointed at me and picked me to read the part of Grendel's mother, which is, like, isn't that big of a deal in the long run, but to someone who felt so unaccepting of themselves and who felt so unaccepted in high school, it was like a really devastating thing to me. I was like, listen, lady, I'm not trying to get out of reading. Give me literally any other part. But you assigned the most masculine female in your class the part of basically the only female part in that entire, like, book play thing. And it's just a thing that you should recognize that I'm not comfortable, and you should stop making me uncomfortable. So the only time I felt bad or unaccepted in high school was pretty much entirely because of adults. People who were my friends treated me exactly how I asked them to treat me. And people who weren't my friends didn't care, and I didn't talk to them, and that didn't change after I transitioned. We just didn't talk, and I didn't really care what they thought. But adults are the worst. They really are.
Being around really like good people helps and makes a difference in understanding and learning about yourself ultimately. So yeah, get out there.
One last thing I would like to add, which is totally cliche, but it seriously does get better. Especially if you're able to surround yourself by people who accept and encourage you to be your own true self. I've learned to cut people off who are unaccepting and find new people who are. This is your own life. You're writing your own story. No single person should be allowed to make it anything less than amazing. So cut your losses and keep being fabulous.